economy is not just important, it is essential. But I'm sure you know if you are here. Seafuture stands as a platform to embody that spirit of global cooperation and to forge partnership that will drive innovation and security for the future. It exists to create a bridge between countries, facilitating industrial cooperation and mutual growth in areas that affect all of us, the oceans, our most critical shared resource. Today, I'm especially proud to announce a new milestone for Seafuture, the creation of the Seafuture Ambassador title. This title is not just an honor, it is a responsibility. Those appointed as Seafuture ambassadors will carry forward our mission to promote the values of cooperation, innovation, and sustainability on a global industrial scale. It is with great pride that we award the very first Seafuture ambassador title to Admiral Ribuffo, who stands with us today. Admiral Ribuffo, your leadership and vision have made a lasting impact, and we are honored to have you as our first ambassador. Congratulations. Before we present the promotional video for the next edition of Seafuture, I would now like to pass the floor to my colleague, Laura Parducci, who will provide you with further details about the exciting developments ahead. Finally, a special thank you to Fincantieri, whose role as strategic sponsor has been pivotal in the success of Seafuture. Thank you all for your attention, and please enjoy the video.
Before history, before memory, when the only life on Earth was in the water. From the depths, everything began. And humanity set off on its journey. We have conquered the land, soared through the sky. We have pushed beyond the horizon. Now, we realize the future isn't just ahead of us, but also beneath us, at the bottom of the sea.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. I'm Laura Parducci, and the Senior Project Manager of Seafuture event. And now, let me give you an overview of the event. Seafuture is an international exhibition that started from its first edition in 2009, and it is steadily growing. It is an exhibition that regards the wide-ranging blue economy. Seafuture offers an unrivaled access to the fast-growing national and international markets, attracts specialists, contractors, clients, national institutions, international delegations, companies, and stakeholders from all over the world. And here are the numbers that you can see, and you can see the difference. In 2014, we started to realize the event inside the naval base. And this is the reason why we grow at a higher level. These are the numbers. And this is a short video that recaps the 2023 edition. Okay, and now let me give you some words about the focuses on Sea Future 2025, the topics that are, of course, shipbuilding, defense and dual use, green technology, maritime safety, cyber and 5G, artificial intelligence, which is, of course, transversal to all the previous themes, and research and development, navigation and communication systems, underwater, defense technology, maritime technology, smart ports, smart cities, and energy transition. The focuses are those regarding both the conferences and the exhibition area that are underwater dimension and cyber defense, and then some focus on dual-use sectors like energy transition and smart ports and smart cities. The key players, as you could see in the video, the most prestigious market players, Italian and foreign institutional, military and civil delegation, small and medium enterprises, research centers and universities, startups and technological clusters. We envision Sea Future as a partnership platform to develop your own international network, to meet your peers, to meet with companies, clusters, stakeholders, and institutions, to meet technology developers and suppliers, and to identify potential ones, to keep up with the latest market development. What Sea Future offers to participants, especially to foreign delegations: conferences and workshops, pre-organized B2B and B2G meetings, the best technologies also for fitting and upgrading, and visits on board. Visits on board on new and decommissioned military ships that will be docked in front of the exhibition area. And of course, we will offer an hospitality package to all the foreign delegation. Conferences and workshops will regard a cutting-edge and future-oriented conferences program. About, again, the B2B and B2G meetings between companies and between international delegation and industry leaders, the exhibitors, the national and international delegations are linked with each other prior to the event through a specific recording service for personalized B2B and B2G meetings based on their projects and requirements. Why? To find targeted contractors with purchasing proposals according to your technical requirement, and then to accelerate the decision-making process with pre-arranged meetings. Exhibition of naval innovation that, as I told before, it will be inside the exhibition area and on the docks in front of the building where the event will take place. And then we will have a startup area because we think that innovation is, of course, above all. Emerging startups and their maritime technologies are overturning existing sceneries. That's why we will launch a dedicated call at startups at international level, and the best startups will be allowed to participate for free in the event. And then a few words on the location, the Gulf of La Spezia. Seafuture is organized in a unique location overlooking the sea and strategically positioned for the maritime industry and at the heart of the Mediterranean Sea. The Gulf of La Spezia also set itself as the headquarters of Italian research institutions and international ones operating on the sea. University center, we have a special course of the Genoa University. We have the Center for Maritime Research of the NATO. We have the Naval Support and Testing Center of the Italian Navy, the System Port Authority of Eastern Ligurian Sea, and of course the research center, the Italian research centers that deal with sea, that are CNR, INGV, ENEA, and the LTM, that is the Liguria Cluster of Maritime Technologies, which also involve the Navy. It is the only cluster in Italy involving the Italian Navy. And then La Spezia, as you saw in the past day, it is also the location where is seated the PNS, Il Polo Nazionale della Subacquea, where all the underwater domain will be developed and explored. Here are some involved lead players of the 2023 edition, many ministries, and of course also the participation of foreign countries' delegation. And well, that's all for me. I thank you for your kind attention. And of course, I hope I will see you all in the next September in La Spezia from 29th to 2nd of October, 2025. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, after projecting into the future, we now dive into the deep blue with an out-of-the-box perspective provided by Mr. Umberto Pellizzali, which I kindly call on the floor. Umberto, please.
Thank you, everybody. I'm really proud of being here. Thanks, Admiral, for inviting me here. I'd like to talk to you about my discipline. I'm a free diver. I go underwater holding my breath. And I'd like to talk to you about this relationship, this collaboration with the Italian Navy that started about more than 20 years ago. You see from the video, I tried one of my records, minus 150 meters deep, with the support of Nave Anteo, which is the boat, an important boat of the Italian Navy. I think that that support was absolutely important. The sea was pretty rough, strong wind, and because of one mistake I made, the last training, deep, last equalization, I broke my drum. So the condition I had in front of me was pretty difficult, but I think I was helped by the team, by the deep sea divers of the Italian Navy and my safety team. This is the discipline of no limits, variable weight. The free diver is descending with a sled. I had about 50 kilos on the sled. You have to equalize, you have to adapt your body to the condition you find out there. And once you arrive to the bottom, you can ascend pushed by the balloon. The conditions we have, physiological condition we have at the maximal depth, here we are 150 meters deep. We have 16 atmospheres. Lungs are 16 times smaller than normal size. The rest of the chest is blood. Blood is liquid. Liquid is uncompressible, and for this reason we are not crushed by the pressure. And then we can go back with the balloon, pushed by the balloon. I left the balloon when I was about 60, 65 meters deep to have the time to tank all divers at that depth, from that depth to the surface for for the safety, for the help, and everything. When you go on the water, you're doing something that is absolutely opposite to our nature. We are done for breathing, for living in one atmosphere, standing up, head up. Down there, you change everything. And you have 1 year, the time of adaptation and training, to establish in your body the conditions we had after 6 months after birth when we come to the world. I told you, lungs are down there are very small. The rest is blood. We have 16 atmosphere on each centimeter square of our body. 16 kilos pushing your drums inside, and you have to find air from your lungs to move the drum to the neutral condition. And I broke one in the last dive, training dive. You have no oxygen, so your brain is distributing the oxygen very slow. Bradycardies are very strong. We have about 10, 12, 15 heartbeats per minute. And you have to adapt your body to that condition. Down there is black, no light, darkness, no noise, and the gravitational force is working on your body in a different way. So you're different in a different world. And for this reason, you have to be mentally ready to work in that environment. But it's beautiful. The sensations we have are very deep, let's say so, strong. What I feel while going down, step by step, my body is disappearing, especially when I'm pushed back down by the sled, when I do not have to kick down. I don't make any physical effort. The sled is pushing me down. I feel my body is disappearing, no more legs, arms, just my head. And in my head, I feel the orbit. I feel I have to equalize, and you're alone with yourself. You know that safety divers are around you for your safety, to be controlled, to be relaxed, and the sensation you have is really beautiful. This is the reason why, even if I stopped competing 20 years ago, I'm still going underwater, I'm still training, I'm still freediving, because I like what I feel down there. Once you come back, step by step, your body is coming again to the normal size, normal shape, and once you're up to the surface, you arrive and you breathe for the first time. That breath is particularly strange. Enzo Mallorca was one of the pioneers of this discipline. In one of his books, he wrote, "I don't remember the first breath I did when after 9 months I was burned, but I think that breath we did, the very first breath of our life, and the air we take after one deep free dive is something similar, because it represents the border between aquatic form of life and normal terrestrial life, what we have any time of our day." I met for the first time this professional working on Anteo. I established a professional and relationship, also friendship with them. I learned very much from these people. Especially, I discover a great team working together, and I discover, how interested they are in everything they do. This relationship started more than 20 years ago, and is still going on. I'm now working with the special forces of the Italian Navy. We're working for, I try to train them to the powerful, to the importance of managing the breath in a good way. Breath is one of the most important things we have, and sometimes we don't realize. We're not able to understand how important it could be, and how important it is, especially for controlling situation of stress, fearness, and whatever. So let's say so. I like to bring my contribute to my country, to these special persons, to these professionals, with my passion, with my discipline, freediving. And one more time, it's incredible how the passion I discover with these people that did are able to do everything. Anytime I spend time with them, it's incredible how much they want to learn. After 12 hours training, they still want to stay underwater because they think they could be better in something. Breathing, holding the breath, technique, aquatic movement in the water. And I consider myself really, let's say, I'm really happy to be part, let's say so, of this team because I think it's important for me to let them understand that how a simple discipline like freediving could be important for their professional activity. So time is pretty short. I could have many other things to tell you. But anyway, thanks, Admiral, for inviting me here. Thanks to the Marina Militare Italiana for inviting me. Thanks to you for your attention. And all the best. And I hope to go on being a good friend of you. Thanks a lot.
Dear guests, before beginning the closing ceremony, we now resume the working session with the rope-up panel, chaired by Professor Andrea Margelletti, which closes 3 inspiring and rich days of works. I would like now to invite to the stage the members of this panel, Professor Andrea Margelletti, who is the chairperson, Admiral Sir Ben Key, KCB, CBE, ADC, Professor Antonio Patalano, and Dr. Ian Ralby. Professor, please.
Undersecretary of Defense Matteo, Honorable Matteo Perigoli Cremnago. Si sente? Ok. Undersecretary of Defense Matteo Perigoli Cremnago, Chief of Naval Operation Capital Maggiore Enrico Credendino, President Chairman Giulio Tremonti, former Minister of Defense, distinguished guest, naval officer, most of all sailors, good morning. I'm very proud today to chair. I try to be a good stoplight of an excellence from my right, Professor Randy from the US, that is a prominent founder or CEO of Higher Consilium. On my right, Rule Britannia Rule by Ways, the First Lord of UK, Naval Forces, and Professor Patalano of London King's College. We will discuss very easily, I will try to not to stop, you are much more interested than me, about what we have discussed today. We start from the military forces. You have, Sir Key, an UK Royal Navy, and you personally has an extensive ASW experience. But today, and in these days, we spoke about something different, with an underwater domain, the new challenges. How is the seabed warfare changed, and which kind of threats or challenges the NATO will face in the future in this new domain, all the new domain? Thank you.
Professor, thank you very much, and a great question to start. The The challenge that I think we're all facing now is that the underwater domain requires us to have that same understanding of all that is within it in the same as we do on land and on the surface of the sea, which is not something we have traditionally done. Over the past years, we have been looking for specific things, either within a minefield or a submarine, and everything else that is down there is just assumed to be, but is fine. And other than the information we require to put accurate sea charts together for the safety of navigation, it has not been so important for us to understand the infrastructure that is there, whether fixed or mobile, to the degree that we now are being required to do. And the investigation always used to be about the structure of the water column. How was it that we could understand the acoustic nature of so that we could find specific objects? Now I think it is the structure of the water column remains extremely important, but actually the entire physical environment within which you operate below the waves has an importance that has not been the case in the past. Because people are exploiting it in many different ways, and panel chairs here will talk about some of the insights we gained over the last 2 days. But for us, it is how do we think differently about it. Now, Admiral Enrico has challenged us as to whether or not this brings in an entirely new and valid warfare domain in and of itself. The complications of trying to establish that we debated at some length informally amongst ourselves. But where I think there is validity to the question is in the processes and intellectual perspectives we need to bring to a dimension where now people are not seeking just maneuver advantage, but actually prosperity advantage as well. And that has great implications for all of our nations.
Thank you, Admiral. Dr. Redby, you have an extreme experience in about hybrid threats. Many of us, I guess I was one of them, we thought that hybrid threats or part of Gerasimov doctrine was more adapted to the information warfare. But how in reality hybrid warfare could fit inside the seabed warfare agenda?
Professor, thank you very much for that very challenging question. I think hybrid aggression in the maritime space is often defined doctrinally in words and ways that are not terribly clear. And I turn to a definition based on elements that Professor Jim Bergeron at NATO Maritime Command has offered up. And I think it's helpful for contextualizing where that hybridity in the submarine domain could exist. He says there are 4 key elements. The number 1 is that we are talking about states that have conventional forces that are choosing to use some kind of unconventional action. The second is that we always have this degree of implausible deniability. We know who is likely behind the activity, but we have our own systems of certainty that are required to pin accountability on states before we actually say it. And so we know who did it, but we can't say it quickly enough. And that time lag is part of the strategic advantage that hybrid aggressors are looking for. The third element is that there's always an illegal act, and we've talked a lot about the law this week, and breaking the law is always part of hybrid aggression. And the fourth is that the activity is scalable. It can be dialed up or dialed down depending on the response, so it's always iterative. There's often a fifth element as well, which is that there is some degree of strategic communication, attempt to control the narrative. So if we turn that elements-based definition to the sub-maritime domain, we start to have to ask some key questions. What is it that we are actually talking about in the maritime domain? Where does the law actually sit? What are we protecting? What are we governing? We talked yesterday about governance as having sort of 2 elements. The goal of governance is to solve the challenge of disorder. But it has to have 2 parts. One is to control and provide that order, and the other is to have accountability. And part of the problem that we have in the hybrid situation is that there has to be a violation of law, but if we haven't figured out what it is we are securing, what it is we are governing, what it is we are protecting, what it is we are developing in the submaritime space, we won't have the laws in place and we won't have the accountability measures in place to be able to create that violation of law. And so in some ways it's hybrid, in other ways it's just taking advantage of a void in governance. And so I'm reminded of something I actually said in Los Angeles. I had the great pleasure and honor of being with Admiral Credendino and others at the visit of Amerigo Vespucci to the United States. And we were talking about the blue economy and securing the blue economy. And I think it's a very apt discussion for what we're talking about here. And I brought up the concept of both sea blindness and wealth blindness. And we heard earlier this week from Michael Lodge, the Secretary General of the International Seabed Authority, that we all need greater deep sea literacy, which I think is a fantastic concept, deep sea literacy. But in the context of blindness, I think it's worth pointing out that we don't understand the possible value of the maritime domain on the surface, much less beneath it. Unfortunately, at this moment, those who understand the surface value the best are the criminals who would do it harm. And those who understand the subsurface the best is no one, because we are so open to exploration at this point. And so when we look at that, we have an opportunity, and as I said yesterday, I think as militaries in particular, we have a responsibility to try to get ahead of where nefarious actors could exploit this. So whether it's in the hybrid context, the criminal context, or some kind of nefarious space, we need to be opening our eyes as much as possible, seeing with clarity, listening to those who are studying the maritime space from a scientific standpoint, from an industry standpoint, from all sorts of different standpoints, in order to be able to figure out how to put into place both the structures of control and the structures of accountability. Otherwise, hybrid aggressors will take advantage without any possible recourse.
Thank you. Quite scaring.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you very much. Professor Batalano, we are in Venice, one of the four sea republics in Italy. So much less important than my hometown, Genoa, by the way. By the way, you have an extensive experience in Indo-Pacific, so we are obviously in Venice and we have a Mediterranean-centric approach. How do you cope with the different approach between the Mediterranean navies, European navies, with a new rising star that is the Indo-Pacific threats?
So first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And let me start with an apology. As a trade, I'm a military historian, an academic, so usually I'm a problem-creating kind of person, not a problem-solving. So if you want answers to what we've learned the last couple of days, just look next to my right. That's where you find the answers. So
we count on him. We count on him.
So to further complicate the picture, I think first of all, this journey for me, I would say it started probably in the first half of 2022 in Singapore, when we held a conference not too dissimilar from this one, and then it continued in November 2022 in Sydney, where the Australian Navy organised its own Seapower, and then we gravitated in between the first Seapower conferences, the Paris Naval Conference, and now here. So this is almost a culminating point of a 2-year long journey that, in answering your questions, tells me two things. One, there is an incredible international conversation taking place in which that is based upon a general recognition that the maritime domain, both as a place upon which modern societies deeply depend in ways in which it was not ever the case before. Any century could be a maritime century, but the 21st century defines the relationship between human beings and modern societies and the sea in ways that it simply was not comparable to before. And I think what the First Lord just mentioned and what we've heard the last couple of days about the foundations of today's prosperity, the fact that digital connectivity and energy requirements rest on a network of undersea cables, of pipelines. It's redefining our defense. Now, from that perspective, that's something that is common whether you are in the Indo-Pacific, if you are in the Gulf of Guinea, as we learned in the very first panel that I chaired, in Latin America, or indeed in the Mediterranean or the Baltic. So from that perspective, I think the first good story that really I take away from these 2 days, in which the undersea domain, I'll come to this point in a minute, is central, is that perhaps it's time to be comfortable enough to suggest that in debates over national security, the maritime century upon which our modern societies depend redefines the role that the maritime has in that conversation. And that, in the last couple of days, is something that really came across. We've seen the Italian experience with the Ministero del Mare, with these cross-departmental projects that vertically at the national level are bringing together different institutions across government, but in the private and public sector as well, to have that conversation. And perhaps there is no one-size-fits-all. That's the second point I take away when we compare to the Indo-Pacific. There's not a single model, but because of the convergence over the core elements of the conversation, we could probably say that looking at each other and comparing notes is the beginning of that one conversation, of that vertical element. But then the other thing that I learned, and this perhaps is something that in the Euro-Atlantic Mediterranean context compared to the Indo-Pacific, it's something that we can take comfortably in our conversations with counterparts in other parts of the world, is that horizontal conversation across different countries, particularly in the multilateral space. And yesterday in particular, we talked with how the EU is engaging over the questions of frameworks of the European Defence Agency, but also how NATO and NATO research centres are looking at the tools and the capabilities necessary. So we've got something here in terms of multilateral efforts to engage with these 2 components that the undersea domain is bringing to the conversation. One that is about maritime governance, and I'm very much with Ian in this respect. We need to have a conversation with the ISA because the seabed frameworks are relatively underdeveloped compared to other parts. But then you have also the capacity of the undersea domain to operationally enable in an integrated fashion that multi-dimension of joint security and warfighting operations that are very much at the heart of the security side of that conversation. So I'd say one element of great continuity and one element that really speaks to how we need to think about the fact that this is an international conversation with very different local or localized application.
You have 2. You have the man of the answers, so please do.
I'm not sure that I have the answer, but one of the things I was struck by yesterday's conversation, which started in the morning with a panel of naval chiefs effectively describing emerging strategies, emerging doctrines, and emerging technologies to deal with a series of problems in the underwater domain, where people are thinking around how, the holistic solution space requires us to have strategy and doctrine and concepts of operation, to be trialing it, and we've had a lot of those bits and pieces. And then in the afternoon, in Ian's panel, we were challenged, I think, by Professor Christian Beuger, who, by the way, I'm looking forward to reading your book, Professor Beuger, because you told us it was the Bible to all the solutions we needed in this area, which is a bold claim before Amazon has even published a review. But the bit that came up in the panel was, who is stress testing the current governance approach in order to find out where the gaps in it is? And I think we're stress testing it already, actually. I think the problem we're all realizing is that in an area which was designed fundamentally to be open to all, the speed now is for the criminal mind can move quicker than those not. And the bit that is missing is the jeopardy for misbehavior. And somehow that is a policy question as much as it is a technical question the navies of the world will push very hard on providing solutions along, and I don't mean that just as military navies. I think it's, you know, the kind of the merchant marine community. But somehow there needs to be a joined up space that articulates that in a framework which was designed to be free, we now realize is being exploited for potential harm faster and in a way that was not envisaged when that framework was put together. And I found the kind of the last day and a half has been fascinating in how it's elucidated, and I think here I'm really agreeing with Alessio. Over the last couple of years, we have been sharpening the question. It's the confidence with which we now step into the answer space that I think that's a great bit of academic waffle I've been learning well from my good friend Alessio.
On this particular point, would you perhaps agree with the proposition that what we're looking at is, and this has really came across with something that you were sharing in the panel yesterday, that it struck me that what we're looking at is when we're thinking about in security terms about the undersea domain, you've got vulnerabilities, which really connects to the functions of daily life and the seabed, and so this is about the protection of the environment, the integrity of the network systems, whether these cables of energy pipelines. So that's the sort of stuff that it's a vulnerability, right? It's always there. Then you have a second element, which is risks, and these are unplanned, unintended disruptions. Your shark yesterday, as opposed to the anchor from a fishing boat, right? And these first two elements really speak to resilience. And I know that we've had this conversation with Christian a number of times, that here part of the answer is to think half of it in terms of resilience and half of it in terms of defense and deterrence. Because not everything is about the navies or the coast guards. This is about, particularly when it comes to vulnerabilities and risks, this is about all the operators ensuring that what they do, it's sustainable and it's sufficiently resilient. And we've heard this conversation from industry yesterday about the tools and the assets they're developing for the integrated systems. And then I think that's the third sort of level, and that's where really states and navies come in. And that's the question of threats. The threats to this infrastructure, that is really the result of intended and malicious disruptions, interference, in order to gain a political coercive pressure and advantage. That's the three sort of way of, I would put it, to layer it and cluster together resilience and defense through vulnerabilities, risks and threats.
Regarding what you just said, let me ask you to all of you, which is the balances nowadays in a peer-to-peer competence between vulnerabilities and opportunities? Alessio.
Yes, sir. So that's the other thing. And I think, again, Ian, I think you made a very good point yesterday about the fact that we need to think about governance frameworks as an opportunity to limit the space where the malicious can find opportunities, but enhance the opportunities of those who actually need to take that potential prosperity that the undersea is going to give us to its maximum extent benefit. And at the same time, create a space whereby cooperation, if it can be found, it will be found. Would you agree with that?
100%. And I think we are all, by virtue of the fact that we live on land, we are all inherently naive with regard to the benefits as well as the detriments to the underwater domain. And I think that speaks to one of the challenges of even assessing risk, of dealing with some of these resilience and defense measures. I think Ilaria Tani yesterday said this very well, in that we are working in a space that transcends any of the normal parameters that we have put into place for even some of the most long-standing aspects of operating in the maritime space. Search and rescue. We have known how to do search and rescue forever because it's pretty fundamental to operating at sea. But we do that on the surface. To now have to look at it from a vertical standpoint as well creates a whole set of new challenges, both in terms of the physical aspects, but also in terms of just conceptually. And I think that is a good metaphor for why a lot of the normal approaches to even red teaming don't work, because we don't have enough imagination as to what is possible to even understand where the vulnerabilities are, where the risks are, where the threats are, or where the opportunities are. And I think that's why we have to be collaborative and cooperative in working together to share insights beyond the normal communities we work with. So hearing about free diving and learning and having that kind of a connection is critical. Learning from scientists, learning from the industry that is dealing with submarine cables and pipelines, the industry that is piloting new approaches to commercialize submarine activity. And if you think about militaries, we tend to focus on military against military security. That is what militaries traditionally look at. Law enforcement agencies look at how to deal with anybody that's violating a very clear set of prescribed laws. Companies look at how to comply with a regulatory environment that allows them to do certain things but constrains them from doing others. None of those traditional approaches is apt in the maritime maritime domain. The underwater world is largely uncharted, largely unexplored. We've heard over and over that we're better at space than we are at the underwater world, and yet it's right next to us, it's right around us, it's right beneath us. And so we have long talked about the value of the maritime domain to life on land and said, 90% of world trade happens by sea. And we've cited the statistic that 70% of the earth is covered in water. But what we are encumbered by is the fact that 100% of us live on land. And we have got to change our thinking in order to be able to approach these really normal concepts of threats, of vulnerabilities, of risk, of compliance, of all the things that normally would govern a space in a new way. And when it comes to accountability, we're further challenged by structures we have already put in place. We're talking about domains beyond national jurisdiction. And that limits us, right? It's going to be a real challenge to maintain the current system of freedom of navigation, of open seas as much as possible, while also having to come up with some kind of sovereign nation-state-based mechanism for accountability. And this is where, going back to hybridity, I mean, we have all kinds of threats. We're talking about the subdomain, not the Arctic or ice, but to give an example of where creativity, even on the surface, could come into play. What legal tools do we have to deal with some kind of security threat occurring on an ice floe outside of 12 nautical miles? Ice does not have a national personality. It doesn't have a flag. It isn't a vessel. And yet we could have a threat that is floating on ice outside of anybody's national jurisdiction. And so our laws are built on certain assumptions about how the world works and how the maritime space works. And as technology has improved, as our ability to explore the underwater world has improved, we have to start rethinking how to apply traditional concepts to a new space. Jacques Cousteau has featured heavily in this conference. I actually last week was speaking to his grandson, Philippe, and he told me some of the stories of the early days of Jacques Cousteau's the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, which is now quite old. And yet is still probably one of the most inspiring bits of life. Yeah, exactly. It's what many got interested in the maritime domain around. And the challenge of figuring out how to put a camera underwater and then have that film actually developed was so extreme that it was months between when they did the filming and when they found out what they had actually filmed and whether they needed more. Today, any one of us can take what's sitting in our pocket and go and do something more technologically advanced just outside in a moment's time. And that really speaks to the speed of change. It's less than a century before the first underwater camera was able to record images beneath the sea, and yet now we're at a place where private technology can go well into the depths and explore things beyond. So how do we make this adaptation? And this is why an event like this is so critical for even broaching the subject of governance, much less trying to figure out how to do it.
Admiral, I'll try to provide you a £1 million question. We know that we depend, so you spoke about our mobile, no? We depend about the technology, we depend about rare earth material and so on. And the first day the Italian MOD, Guido Crosetto, explained very clearly the fact that we may found, or we could found, in the seabed, material forever in some senses. So the question is, do you think that a race for the seabed could change or will change the balance of power of a surface superpower or regional superpower nowadays? We will see new superpower because they will arrive first, or you think that in the future the level of power, political power, military power that we have above the surface will be the same that we will find under the surface? I said £1 million. Question.
So, I think we all understand, we wouldn't be here if we weren't sort of aligned to this. We all understand that the sea is fundamentally about prosperity. It's not about security. And each of our nations in investing in navies, whether merchant or military, have been doing that to secure wealth. And it's at its best when we do that in partnership, and history has taught us it is at its least effective when you try to do it on your own and you isolate yourself from others. But the sea is fundamentally, whether it's for the movement of goods or now what we're finding for the exploitation of wealth from the seabed, this is merely the next stage of that story. Most of the navies in the room, in fact, most navies around the world, were formed not as protective mechanisms of land, but as a protective mechanism of trade.
Yeah.
Whereas most of the armies of the world were formed as a protective mechanism of land, or to go and get some more from somebody else. And that, therefore, how we think about this domain and the security of it, I think, is going to be challenged by the technologies as they become good enough to exploit what's on the seabed and below it. I think that's an inevitable piece. And of course, the reason why I think the bet is on the seabed is because we understand what can be exploited from the surface of the sea pretty well now, so it is not a disruptive area. And most of the people who lead in the way I think you described the bet will be those who work out how to do the seabed. Now, a lot of people will have a go and fail, just as we've seen in a lot of the people that have tried to, the way that the marketplace has operated in the digital technologies. Yeah. A lot of people have tried it, yeah. A few have succeeded, and in doing that, they have become extremely wealthy and powerful. And we will find that on the seabed. But the race for that those mineral deposits which are clearly on the seabed, or the ability to extract energy from the seas in a way that we have not done today, the people who crack that will determine an awful lot. The question is, do we allow them to do so purely to their advantage, or do we establish a framework in advance that it then becomes a meritocracy that the nations of the world can benefit from, because we go back to the fundamental point of the sea. It is about the shared prosperity of humankind.
Thank you, Alessio. Do you foresee that we will see a race for the seabed like the race for the moon, like we have seen many decades ago?
So, if I learned anything in the last couple of days and the last couple of years, is that we're already in a race. It's just okay. how we drive through that race. But I will put it this way. So, first of all, allow me to be an academic for 2 seconds, please. So, first of all, I think what is emerging from this conversation in the last couple of days is perhaps the need to talk about seabed warfare on one hand and undersea security on the other. Because if we want to reconcile the resilience that element with the deterrence and the defense elements and talk comprehensively about vulnerabilities, risks and threats, perhaps we need to start sharpening our vocabulary so that then we can develop the relevant grammars. So the first thing that I would say from this conversation in the last couple of days that is started to emerge in my mind is, and I think the French head of Navy, the strategy, the way he talked about it, it really captures what I think is the seabed warfare of the component. And Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our conversations in the UK, to an extent, covers that too. But there's the broader undersea security element, which has an element of resilience in that. So that's the first point. And it links directly to this question about the race, because when we're talking in particular about seabed warfare, what's operating around the seabed means and sort of is all about, on one hand, is about prosperity and the link between prosperity and the vulnerabilities it creates. Those who want systematically harm, disrupt data cables and pipelines for political advantage. And that's very much where navies on surface are coming from, right? So that's that prosperity thing. But the other thing is something that Admiral Franchetti said yesterday about how the seabed is part of that bigger integrated picture in which seabed warfare is also about enabling joint warfare as a whole, right? It's about the data that then enable the environment within which modern military organizations operate. And so in that sense, it seems to me that you've got a race that has two dimensions. One about the strategic value of the seabed as a source of prosperity, and another one about the seabed as a place whereby we're looking at one of the enabling dimensions of joint multi-domain warfare today. That would be the thing. Now, taking a step back and to your sort of broader question about what are the implications in terms of power relations at the structural level of international relations, for my mind, I would throw something out there in a slightly different ways. Now, of the 77 countries that define themselves as small states in the UN, right? About 50 of them combined together, they hold control, in terms of sovereign rights, about 4/5 of the world global's EEZ. These are also the countries that have the least resources to develop a full capacity to exploit and control those EEZ. So here's the challenge for all of us looking ahead. We might have a global order at sea that through the seabed is redefined. But if we empower everybody with their own voice in engaging over a sustainable development, and we empower them with the tools to do so in that undersea domain space, then the result might very well be a much more equitable global order at sea, at the seabed, in which, yes, of course, you will continue to have the warfare element to it, but in terms of managing the risk, the vulnerabilities, the prosperity picture, we might actually be looking at the first time ever whereby the ones that have the least resources and capabilities can be empowered to have a voice and shape how that space leads forward. And that would be, genuinely speaking, at the structural level of international relations, an utter revolution.
Ian.
Thank you. I think this notion of prosperity is a really important point, and I think the ties well to the fact that this is a Seapower conference. Seapower has long meant the preeminent sea power has long been the preeminent land power as well. Whether they have a massive army or not, they are usually a leading state in the world. And I think when we get to the underwater domain, I mentioned the concept of sea blindness. And I think we're also very blind as to the wealth. And the way I explain wealth blindness is if I gave you a bucket of gold and I said, you can't weigh it, you can't look up the price of gold, go sell it and get the best price you can. You could come back to me and say, I got $100,000 for that bucket, 100,000 euros, 100,000 pounds. And I could say, that's fantastic, but it was worth $1 million. And the problem was you didn't know how much you had and you didn't know how much it was worth. And so you sold yourself 90% short. And there are so many examples of that in the maritime space today of people selling sea cucumbers for $1 each when the broker that's buying them is selling them for $150 to $250 a piece. And so there's all kinds of examples of that on the surface and in the fisheries space right now. But when it comes to the underwater world, we don't even know what we're talking about. We don't know what the genetic material is. There's undiscovered minerals, there's undiscovered features. We have no idea. Innovation hasn't come close. And so the other side of wealth blindness is if I handed you a bucket of clay and I said, same thing, can't weigh it, can't look up the price of clay, go sell it, get the best price you can. And you come back and say, I got $100. I can say, that's amazing. It was only worth 50. But don't you have a friend who's a potter? Couldn't you have turned it into pots and sold it for even more? Don't you have a friend who's a sculptor? Don't those works go for hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars each? How do you add value? And we're not even close to talking about adding value to what's in the underwater domain. And so we have a long way to go before we understand the prosperity, and so we don't know how to secure it. But there is this race, it's on. And Seapower means that we have to be reconceiving what it means to be a preeminent Navy, preeminent sea power, because we are seeing before our very eyes other states already starting to blur the concept. We are seeing authoritarian regimes that do not have the same public versus private split. We are seeing commercial vessels, fishing vessels, vessels of all sorts, including marine scientific research vessels, being conscripted into service on behalf of the government, whether it's official or not. We don't know what is a sovereign vessel in some spaces anymore. Is the People's Armed Force Maritime Militia sovereign or not? Are they contributing to the Blue Ocean Information Network that is perhaps the most advanced anti-submarine warfare capability that we've ever even conceived of? Is the distant water fishing fleet capable of providing not only resources to support the massive population on land, but perhaps also to support claims for territorial acquisition on the high seas and beyond, as well as support to underwater activities? And so if we look back through history, we've always had bold action to sort of claim sovereignty over maritime territory. We sit in Italy, Mare Nostrum, of claiming the Mediterranean for Rome is a great starting point. And if we look to the preeminence of the Royal Navy, Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. The waves aren't what we're talking about anymore. We're talking about what's beneath the waves, and we haven't quite gotten there. And so when we talk about sea power, it is linked to this prosperity, but perhaps our notions of how to pursue that prosperity, who needs to be involved in it, how we divide up the lines of effort in terms of securing it, need to be adjusted. And I think this is, to quote Churchill, this is not the end of this is the end of the beginning, and we're just getting started on the very difficult task of even getting our heads around what is needed, much less how to accomplish it.
Thank you, Ian. Before to end in time our meeting, let me ask a last question to the First Sea Lord about the fact that the world that we are living is faster than ever. And neither the richest country in the world could buy time. Time is the only thing that we are not able to buy. Do you think that the naval forces, NATO, so in general speaking, naval forces will have the time to catch the opportunities for the race, or the risk to remain off-balanced is real?
The person who's missing from this panel on a discussion about sea power states is Professor Andrew Lambert, your colleague, author of a book on the costs and opportunities of being a sea power state through time. And I think if I recall, one of the challenges in that, particularly as time is accelerating in terms of the speed of advance, is that formed systems always move more slowly than unformed systems. And an unformed system is a disruptive one. So it will I think the answer is it will always feel very uncomfortable to us that we feel as if we're behind. But actually, as was shown on one of the graphs yesterday with the kind of exponential versus analog rate, I'm not wholly pessimistic about it, because I think that the speed at which we're seeing change take place around us is the very accelerant we need to pull us towards where we need to go. Our history is that the governance structure is never ahead of the disruptor. By definition, that can't be possible. It's about our ability to keep up. And what I think gatherings like this has done, and where the conversation is now getting to over the last few years, is a recognition that this is a thing. It's not just an idle academic concept. Yeah. It's not something that naval officers like to talk to each other about because it's a way of extracting more money out of our respective treasuries to grow a navy as this is a thing and a problem set that we do need to tackle. So have we got enough time to do it? I think the answer is we are always behind that curve. Do we now have a strength of argument that describes why we need to be making the investments and moving the conversations into a reality rather than a hypothetical one? My sense is we are in a much better position. and what a number of countries around the world are doing in their various models, as Alicia and Ian have described, is demonstrating the various approaches, and it's beholden upon us to keep driving that forward at the speed of relevance.
Yeah. Thank you. Admiral Key, before to end, I will ask you, please a loud applause for my extraordinary guest, and bravo Zulu to all of them. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
I know, it would be just, you know, they used to come here, but they came with the students.
Thank you to our outstanding panelists. Distinguished guests, we follow on our course with the activities of the symposium, and I would like to give the floor to Professor Edvard Luttwak. Professor Luttwak needs no introduction since his reputation precedes him on his ability on international affairs. Buongiorno, Professore.
This meeting, this symposium started 28 years ago with a very simple idea. Navies meet in the sea. They meet each other. Armies do not meet except in war. And when armies meet in war, they meet in some part of the world. Navies meet all over the world. So therefore, it's a good idea for chiefs of the Navy to meet. And it was a rather brilliant intuition, a very good idea. Now, what's happened since the beginning of this cycle, 28 years ago, is that war has returned. When this symposium was formed, the military activity was a question of institutional continuity. There was also the industrial aspect. There are industries making the equipment. And these institutions did their job of maintaining their existence in a world without war. Since the nuclear weapon had arrived, and war means eventually using nuclear weapons, everybody is dead, therefore people will not start wars. That was the context of this symposium. So originally it was a meeting of everybody. Then, with the withdrawal of Russia, the withdrawal of China, and others who don't come, it has become no longer a meeting of all the navies, but of the friendly navies, the navies that talk to each other, the navies that can meet together in a room. And this change, of course, is so new and revolutionary. I mean, after 1945, everybody understood big war had finished, because big war would be nuclear. When President Putin of the Russian Federation decided to invade Ukraine, and then not use the nuclear weapon, and then say, I will not use the nuclear weapon unless Russia is falling. When he did that, he restarted war as a normal phenomenon of life for which people have to be really ready. Now, of course, societies formed during the interval, the nuclear interval with no war, cultures formed, attitudes formed in regard and considering war as a very exotic, extinct activity, an ancient activity, like cannibalism or something. So it will take time for this to return. But it's not only Ukraine, of course. We now have the situation where it is the declared intention of the President of the People's Republic of China, which is not a small country, to use force to reconquer another entity called Taiwan. Therefore, war has not only returned in this corner of Europe, of Ukraine, but has returned in the Pacific area. So this is a global change. Now, some societies are politically locked in, culturally locked in a way that they cannot really adapt to this. They can't accept the fact. Now, I see this in a particular personal perspective because I am very old and I was in a British boarding school as a foreign child, but I was in a British boarding school. At the age of 14, automatically, everybody there who wasn't strange, peculiar, joined the Cadet Corps, which was provided by a British regiment. And at that time, our sergeants who came from the Cowley Barracks, Oxford, this was the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, gave us 4 rounds of ammunition to fire our first rifle at the age of 14. But you did not get the ammunition until you used the rifle with the bayonet to stab the figure of an enemy there. In uniform and everything, you stabbed them, and then if you were energetic, the sergeant would say, Her Majesty the Queen is giving you 4 rounds of ammunition for your rifle. And so I am actually prehistoric in terms of the current conditions, because after that I was in 2 armies and various wars, the little wars that occurred, of course, during the interval. There were no big wars, only little wars, but I was in those little wars. So for me, it's not strange, but I do understand that political leaders, national leaders, the heads of navies, are living in a world where society is not prehistoric. It is formed by one piece of history, the interval of no war. That interval caused by the nuclear weapon. Now, I mentioned President Putin of Russia, but actually India and Pakistan, 2 powers with nuclear weapons, have been fighting not big wars, little wars. Before it was divisional scale war. When they got nuclear weapons lowered the threshold to skirmishing and minor fighting. So it wasn't just Putin who made the post-nuclear war. Actually, I personally blame Professor Krishnaswamy Subramaniam of India, who formed the Indian policy of having very few nuclear weapons, used them only for reaction, not for first, etc., and this idea spread. And this is the idea that the People's Republic of China is now actually taking advantage of. They want to fight a war over Taiwan, and they don't want to ruin this nice little war by anybody using nuclear weapons. And they are expecting this to be so. But of course, it will not be so. It will not be so because nuclear weapons were born too powerful to be useful. Too powerful to be useful. In strategy, everything has a culminating point. You know, you advance Napoleon advances into Russia, he's so powerful, etc., eventually, and so on. Nuclear weapons also, except they were born too powerful. The fact that they were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is only because it was the end of years of very brutal, intense war in places like Iwo Jima. And so if President Truman had not used the weapon, against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he would have been taken out to the White House and thrown, I don't know, hanged possibly, after 1 million Americans died in trying to conquer Kyushu, the southernmost Japanese island, since they lost thousands in Iwo Jima, which is a tiny speck, and so on. So therefore, the return of war is going to change everything, and as it has changed this meeting. The Russians are not here, the Chinese are not here. This is not a meeting of allies, but it is a meeting of friends who are going to be pushed into becoming allies, those who are not, by the fact that there are these threats. Now, on the underwater domain, my limit is approximately 10 meters. So I'm absolutely not qualified to speak because I'm a snorkeler. I snorkel, I put a mask and so on. these things were invented in Italy, in Liguria, before the Second World War, and everybody used them, and I do too, because I like coral. Now, even as a snorkeler, I used to dive in Palawan. Palawan is off the Philippines' main Luzon island, Palawan, and where I used to harmlessly snorkel and so on. More recently, I've gone elsewhere. Now this is a zone that the Chinese are claiming. So war is returning in another way, although it is not a war of shooting, it's a war of pushing. They have these gigantic Coast Guard vessels. As you know, the biggest Coast Guard vessel of the People's Republic of China Navy is 12,000 tons. The biggest American cruiser is 4,000. Their Coast Guard is 12,000 tons. So they go and they push the Filipino ships. They push, of course, now Sarawak and elsewhere and so on. And also I encountered the other Chinese Navy, the fishing Navy, in Galapagos Island. I never saw any Chinese ship, but the experts say that the fish composition in the Galapagos has been influenced by the very concentrated fishing going on. So we will see now how things are. Now, in the Middle East, war never stopped. But the Middle East was exotic and peripheral. And it's only very recently that the Middle East has been an area where at least the one belligerent, Israel, has developed a lot of advanced technology. So, but it was not important in global politics, that the fact that war existed in the Middle East. Now, however, the war has returned to global politics, and we will see which societies are able to adapt and which not, which are able to recover the culture of war, which, as you know, created Europe. Europe was created by little countries, each of which were rivals. There was a professor here before who pointed out quietly that he's from Geneva. The Republic of Geneva used to fight the Republic of Venice. So it was these fights that created the dynamism of Europe. The reason Europe became what it was is because these countries were fighting each other, generating a lot of creativity, invention, destroying a lot of things, rebuilding after wars. And of course, these wars were also the population drivers. Every war killed people. After the war, the women wanted to marry the warriors, the fighters wanted to find women, they made a lot of children, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole dynamic which is returning in this process, and some aspects of this dynamic can be found in the exotic context of the Middle East, where the wars continue without any impact on global culture. But now the moment has come. So this was a meeting of all navies, because all navies meet at sea. So it was really an excellent idea to bring chiefs here that would would improve communications and so on. And now we reach the stage where the conference has changed, not because of any decision made here, but by the decision of the Russians to withdraw, the Chinese to withdraw, and therefore it's becoming a meeting of friends. I'm sorry that I don't talk about the depths of the warfare, which is the subject here, because as a snorkeler, I can never go more than 10 meters deep. So in that regard, I want to put in one word for the snorkelers. Somebody should pass a law, very important law, that people on cruise ships, all these people who go on cruise ships, they should remain on the cruise ships, eat and drink, dance, or amuse themselves, and do not try to go underwater, because what they do, they put on a mask, they cover themselves in sunblocker with metal, zinc metal and other things, and destroy the coral reefs. Already many countries in the Caribbean that advertise the coral reefs have no coral reefs, or at least dead remnants. And one has to go to faraway places like the Solomon Islands, or Palawan, even though I'm not a great snorkeler or anything, I have to travel a long way because I have to go to places where there aren't cruise ships. So perhaps somebody will intervene and tell these people on cruise ships, do not go into the water, or if you do not use sunblocker, just swim. And that is the only little bit of lobbying I want to do for this minor group of people who do not dive deep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Time has come to listen to our sponsors to get the industrial point of view, which is certainly important in the underwater domain. And in this perspective, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Marco De Fazio, Managing Director of the Electronic Division of Leonardo, sponsor of the Symposium, for a brief perspective. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Marco De Fazio. I'm the Managing Director of Electronics Division of Leonardo, dealing with electronics, security, and defense systems for the underwater, for the naval, air, and land domain. And Under Secretary of Defense, Matteo Perego di Gremnago, Admiral Enrico Credendino, distinguished guests. Let me start thanking the Italian Navy for having organized this inspiring, I would say, powerful and also beautiful event, and for having invited also Leonardo as representative of the Italian industry to participating to this event. And I think that this will close more and more the gap between the naval needs and the military needs and the industrial response. This can contribute a lot. It is clear, and I think it is evident now, and we collected many evidences and elements to corroborate and support the definition I've seen before of the underwater as new frontier of the humankind. And there are so many interests converging on the underwater realm, different interests, all interrelated, coming from different and several sectors. We talked about the economic sector, but also the scientific sector, the military sector, naturally, and many other, the environmental sectors, and many other interests that are converging in this environment. And this is what is common to this sector is the request for having more accessibility to the underwater domain, to increase their access to the underwater domain for different reasons, for economic reasons, because they want to get more economic competitiveness, for geopolitical reasons, for getting more geopolitical competitiveness, or for getting more data for scientific analysis or controlling the environment. They are getting more accessibility because technology and techniques are providing all these different sectors with more accessibility. But it means also that we need, on the other end, to regulate this accessibility, to making it secure, to making it, and to defend the environment. And this environment is so fragile and is becoming so crowded. We talked about the economic impact that could have the huge presence of rare minerals in the seabed, we have to regulate this field, and we have also to find a way of protecting and securing this environment. This is the reason why also Leonardo and the defense industry is perceiving the underwater domain as a new frontier for their application, their system, and also the further development of technology. Naturally, this can be done only by a new generation of technologies, techniques, systems, and application. We are fully committed on developing them. Believe me, there are so many streams of different technology development that we have to go through. And just to give you some feed for your thoughts, I would list some of them that I think are in the first priority. First of all, the first thing we are focusing on is the integration, improving the integration on different systems of equipment under the sea and also above the sea, for starting, because we have to leverage on the so-called integration gain. The underwater environment is so difficult, is so harsh, is so inaccessible. The performance of underwater sensors and equipments are poor compared to the correspondent one above water. So we have to leverage on integrating different sensors and systems, leveraging on the integration of uncorrelated systems in order to getting more information and improving our capability of awareness of the underwater domain. Another priority strongly connected to this integration need is developing our artificial intelligence capabilities. We have to rely more on the huge amount of digital data we have in our hands today for improving this integration capability, for improving our integration algorithms in order of getting more information from our systems. We are talking about all digital environments, so we have to protect them. And there is something that we are talking about very often, the need of protecting the digital environments from cyber threats. But adapting cyber threats to digital environments in the underwater domain is something that is peculiar. So these are only few things that we are managing as priority, as industrial priority in our activities relevant to the underwater domain. I think that these extraordinary events helps us to develop our strategies, to address the industry in the right direction, and it is an extraordinary accelerator for converging on a common sense of purpose for facing this so big challenge that is the underwater domain for all of us. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, let me say there will be a little change in the agenda. We will skip the coffee break and we'll continue with the lectures of our speakers to save time. Also because the farewell of the Chief of the Navy will be very short, 1 minute. So we will go straight, and I will call to the floor Ms. Sabrina Sanguinetti, is Vice President of Sales of Italian Navy Relations of the Naval Vessel Business Unit of Fincantieri, is the main sponsor of the symposium. Thank you.
Buongiorno. Good morning. Before we begin, let me share a respectful greeting to the Undersecretary of State for Defense, Matteo Perego di Cremnago, and to the Navy for the terrific organization of this 14th Transregional Seapower Symposium, of which Fincantieri is proud to be the main sponsor, and in particular to the Chief of the Italian Navy, Admiral Enrico Credendino, for giving me the opportunity to share with such an important audience Fincantieri's strategic vision in the underwater market. I wish also to thank Admiral Giampaolo Di Paola, former Italian Minister of Defense, Honorable Giulio Tremonti, former Italian Minister of Economy and Finance, all the authorities and distinguished guests attending here today. As we have heard in these days, the underwater dimension is the next geopolitical domain of strategic importance. This is a field in which Fincantieri has great experience. It is well known that our company is a global leader in the surface combatant segment. Tutto bene? Okay. Fincantieri designs and builds cutting-edge vessels in service in many navies in the international arena. For instance, frames have had a huge success around the world. Let me also highlight that Fincantieri's historical submarine skills started at the beginning of the last century, and since then, 180 boats have been built in our shipyards. We can count on decades of shipbuilding and system integration experience. Our commitment is to combine this unique expertise with cutting-edge technologies and continuous innovation to unlock the potential of the underwater world. Today we are ready, and we are already deeply engaged in several key projects. First of all, in partnership with the Italian Navy, on the U-212 NFS, we developed the lithium battery system to further enhance the capacity of the state-of-the-art submarine. In parallel, we are moving forward with the NGS program to pave the way to the disruptive technologies to be put on board of the next generation submarine through an in-depth industrial scouting activity. Also, we are studying the large solution for U-212 submarine classes within the seabed warfare program. This effort expresses our will to contribute to a more efficient, sustainable, and secure underwater ecosystem. Operating in this challenging environment is incredibly complex due to the harsh conditions present beneath the surface of the sea for both human divers and robotic equipment. Offering a comprehensive solution to monitor and protect assets requires developing pioneering non-conventional underwater solutions. A comprehensive smart infrastructure capable to complement and support submarines and ships' capabilities. In our vision, Fincantieri acts as the orchestrator and integrator of the value chain for an autonomous national supply chain. We can play the role of industrial partner of the Italian Navy for the creation of a strong and credible player in the underwater industry. It will be necessary to develop a clear understanding and vision of the underwater technology ecosystem and build future-oriented technological competencies by collaborating with top national and international players. In this respect, we highlight that collaboration is key, And we, as Fincantieri, are highly committed to foster once more the cooperation with the Italian Navy, which is and has always been of essence for our success. This is what we do, for instance, in the Polo Nazionale della Dimensione Subacquea, which seeks to bolster Italy's leadership in underwater technologies and defense. It might sound a lot, I know, and actually it is a lot. In front of us, or I should say, better say, beneath our feet, we are facing a huge challenge. But let me say that at least this time, our country can join this challenge with great expectations, leveraging on many solid partners and company like Fincantieri that is ready to take the next step. I'm coming to the end of my speech, and I wish to thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to call now on the stage Professor Giulio Tremonti. Professor Tremonti, besides being a renowned economist and academic, served for several times as Minister of Economy and Finance. Today he is a member of the Italian Parliament, Chairman of Foreign and European Affairs Committee of the Chamber of Deputies, and President of Aspen Institute Italia. Professor, please.
Time is out of joint, so said Shakespeare Hamlet at the end of the 16th century. It's the same today in a dramatically fragmented world. Anyway, don't worry, I try to speak of 5 centuries in a few minutes. 4 revolutionary events occurred in the 16th century. Discovery of America, invention of printing, the first global financial disorder, and the Muslim invasion coming against Europe from the East. That was, with the discovery of America, the geopolitical axis of Europe rotated, shifting from the Mediterranean area to the Atlantic one. This led to the emergence in Europe of new nation-states, Portugal, Spain, France, UK, and after, on the Atlantic coast, to the emergence of the New World. Symmetrically, there was the decline of the old Italian republics, starting, unluckily, from Venice. The invention of printing press released knowledge, which had previously been kept closet in monasteries. So the world got Copernicus, Galileo, Descartes with his cogito ergo sum, the basis of the modern science. The extraordinary import from the Americas of gold and silver, and this application inside the archaic rural economies produced financial chaos. So the Spanish kingdom was a victim of 6 consecutive defaults. After the conquest of Constantinople in 1453, starts the Muslim attack to Europe. Overall, it was a mundus furiosus. This was the title of a book printed in Germany in 1567. Yeah. Today is more or less the same due to 4 parallel revolutionary phenomena. Discovery of Asia, and mainly of China, initially an economic discovery, but in today's time, also a political discovery. The net, the basis of a new revolutionary digito ergo sum, which today is propelling us into an artificial existential modernity. Allow me to use naval language. The Navy sails on the sea. Today, people surf on the web. The risk of a global financial disorder coming from the enormous of global debt. At the end, the war coming from the East, coming in Europe, and extended from Ukraine to the Mediterranean area, arriving to the Red Sea. A unique war against the Western world, against our world. In 2000, some years ago, forecasting something similar to what's happening today, I wrote a book with the same title of the old Mundus Furiosus. After half a millennium, no problems of copyright. There is only a difference between today's Mundus Furiosus and the one in the 16th century. Back then, changes developed over the course of a century. Today, changes are instantaneous. Only 30 years from the beginnings to the end of the utopia of globalization, bringing us in a fragmented world. It's said that people learn economics through crisis and politics through wars. Economics, if you go into a pub and if you talk about, for example, a banking union, probably they don't understand or they don't agree. But today, if you talk about defense and security, they understand and they buy you a drink. Defense and security are today the right side of history. By the way, today we are inside the Arsenale di Venezia, the Venetian arsenal or shipyard. And the first historical example of a necessary combination between military industry and naval armament. A combination that was basic for the victory of the West at the sea in front of Lepanto in 1671. I was trying to speak of China, but it's better that I change my... I see a big difference between technique and science. Technique develops with discipline, and certainly, just an example in China, develops big numbers, China. But science is different from technique. Science requires freedom, and freedom is only in the Western world. Freedom and science are basic, and we find freedom and science only in the democratic systems. The case of vaccine is indicative. Only the West produced vaccine. I represent here, I am a member of the parliament. Politics has the duty to conserve and preserve democracy. Your mission is to defend democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I would like now to invite the Italian Undersecretary for Defense, Honorable Matteo Perego di Cremnago, for his closing address. Honorable, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Chief of the Navy, Admiral Credendino, for the warm hospitality here in this beautiful venue in Venice. I greet all the political and military authority present, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Commission, Professor Tremonti, the prominent speaker, and all distinguished guests. We live in a strange world, let me say in this way, where we invest billions to go to Mars, to the race to the space, and just few million in what we have in front of our eyes, the sea, especially the underwater. I really think it's time for a change. Today, global crises are strictly related to the maritime domain. The maritime domain is strictly related to the well-being of our countries, especially for my country, Italy, a country with a strong maritime history and connotation. A large part of the activities and functions we perform every day rely on the sea and underwater dimension. We come from the sea and we depend on the sea. This is the motto of the Symposium. Yet, although life comes from the seabed, which covers an area 10 times larger than the African continent, as I said before, 80% of that have yet to be mapped. I personally imagine a future which our children will swim in seas protected by swarms of underwater drones. And restaurants will not only overlook the coast, but also extend below the surface of the sea, offering extraordinary experience. Furthermore, we have forgotten that 99% of world digital telecommunication and many energy resources pass through the sea via the pipeline on the seabed, with more than 1.5 million kilometers of cable. The underwater dimension issue is not just related to the energy, digital, and well-being, as we have mentioned already. It's also connected to the technological sovereignty, a matter that is now the focus of our attention, especially in Europe and the Western countries. The seabed contains valuable mineral resources, including rare earth elements, which are used in sectors such as renewable energy, defense, aerospace, and consumer, just to mention an example. An F-35 is made by 400 kilograms of rare earth elements. All the above make it necessary to approach everything related to the maritime affair with foresight and strategy. As the distinguished speaker at the Symposium have illustrated, these issues have strong geopolitical implications. They demand awareness and attention, not only from insiders like you, who are well aware of the scope and consequence, but also from those who are still affected by a counterproductive, and was mentioned before, sea blindness, taking for granted what is every day in the sea in terms of security and enabling activities related to our economy. Recent crises reminded us the importance of keeping our seas and infrastructure in them safe. This is why your presence today is so valuable in this particular moment of history. Strong cooperation between our nation and between our Navy is needed more than ever to safeguard international peace and security. We in Italy, we perfectly understood the importance of the issue. The Italian Navy, in fact, has been working for years to monitor and protect the underwater infrastructure in the Mediterranean through Operation Fondali Sicuri within the wider context of the Mediterraneo Sicuro. While important, these initiatives are not enough. It is necessary to adopt a synergic approach combining technology, regulation, and international cooperation, the only key to be successfully with challenges of the current geopolitical scenario. I want to mention that last December in La Spezia, the Polo Nazionale della Dimensione Subacquea, a national hub for underwater aspect, was established. It is a cutting-edge initiative at the international level and demonstrates Italy's clear strategic vision in this specific sector. The primary goal of the hub is to develop advanced technologies such as underwater drones and unmanned underwater vehicles, which have the potential to be a game changer in the management of underwater operations. These technologies are essential not just for the protection of the critical infrastructure, but also for research and sustainable development of natural resources in the underwater domain. Moreover, and I go to the conclusion, at a governmental level, the Comitato Interministeriale per le Politiche del Mare, so-called CIPOM, an interministerial committee for maritime policies, has been set up, drawn up, approved, and constantly update the maritime plan called Il Piano del Mare. One of the objectives of this plan, which is direct interest of Ministry of Defense, is also to draw up regulation governing underwater activities. In conclusion, the underwater dimension and maritime sector, representing over 70% of Earth's surface, are essential for the well-being and security of our countries. They should be approached with a synergic, shared, safe, protect, and sustainable effort, which needs a deep sense of responsibility from all of us. Once again, I thank everyone for their participation in the 14th edition of the Venice Symposium and for contributing discussion and exchange of ideas or point of view. Now, before leaving the floor to Admiral Credendino, allow me to wish all you a safe return to your respective countries and workplace. Wishing for you and the institution and organization you represent here all the best for a future full of success, satisfaction, and increased effective cooperation. Thank you for your attention.
Distinguished guests, another edition of the Trans-Regional Seapower Symposium has come to an end. Before concluding, let's give the floor again to Amerigo Vespucci, which is the Italian best custodian on seamanship, a ship where we learn to work as a team to win challenges. Challenge, teamwork, commitment. With these words and with these beautiful images in our minds, I will give the floor to the Chief of the Italian Navy, Admiral Enrico Credendino, for his closing remarks. Admiral, please.
So good morning again, everybody, and thanks to the Undersecretary of State for Defense, the Honorable Matteo Perego di Cremonago, for being here today with us. I know your agenda is really full, but the fact that you are here really enhances the value of this symposium and this important message that for my government, sea matters. Thank you very much for coming. I had some closing remarks, but everything has already been said, so I prefer that you relax, you have some time to relax in Venice. And the panel this morning was really extraordinary to wrap up what has been said in the last 2 days. So just two things. 67 navies coming from all over the world, more than 50 chiefs of navies are here, despite the difficult times that you are living in. We have, as Professor was saying, we have war everywhere today, but you are here. So today I feel that I have new friends all over the world. I have people that I can trust all over the world. And this is, for me, maybe the most important result of this symposium. So I really thank you all from my heart and from the whole Italian Navy for being here. The second thing, and I thank the two, Senator Tremonti, and for the inspiring presentation, but also Umberto Pellizzari. When Umberto Pellizzari was telling the story of his life, showing us beautiful images of the underwater, I was thinking that, 100 meters on the surface of the earth, what it is nothing. You can walk 20 seconds, you make 100 meters, you can think whatever you want. The worst thing that can happen is that it's raining. Swimming from 100 meters, it's a little bit more difficult, but still, 1-2 minutes, it's safe, it's nothing. Going down for 100 meters is possible only for few men on the earth, on the world, because it's in another dimension. As Umberto was saying, there is no sound, it's dark, and the physical law that regulate this water are very different from the others. So it's a new dimension, and we have to tackle with this new dimension in a very comprehensive way. That's why we are here together also with 146 organizations coming from the maritime cluster, again, from all over the world, experts in different sectors. And today, I feel that I have a better understanding of the underwater domain. I have some answers, not all of them, that I need to tackle the problem. I think that here navies have to play a leading role in a world that is military, but only a small part of this world is military because it's more a civilian world. But we are all together, we have to tackle the issue in a very comprehensive and holistic way, and this symposium was really about being together for a couple of days, discussing, meeting each other, and now I think that we can go on exchanging ideas, and that's all for my part. Now, please enjoy Venice. Thank you very much. I think that we will be hosted by Lisa next October, and see you again in 2 years' time here in Venice. Thank you very much, everybody.
Distinguished guests, the closing ceremony has now concluded. Thank you.